What?
Take your gun off.
Why? What's going on? Hey! Hey! Do not move! Do not move! 266, give me another, I got one at gunpoint. Nissan dealership 29. Go to my patrol vehicle!
What's going on, guys? I hope you're all keeping well out there. Thank you very much for joining me for another video here on Degenerate Watch. In this video we're going to be taking a look at an officer involved shooting which happened in Concord in North Carolina back in February 2022. And if I'm being honest with you guys, I think this is the first shooting that we've actually had on the channel, and I tried to steer away from these type of things for obvious reasons. Not only are those situations very tragic and distressing, they can also be very divisive among people. So we'll see how we get on with this one anyway. So let's take a look at the incident and then we'll come back and discuss it.
What? What?
Take your gun off.
Why? What's going on? Hey! Stop the... What are you doing? What are you doing? Hey! Do not move! Do not move! Do not move! What are you doing? Hey! Get out of the car! Get out of the car! Get out of the car! 266, give me another, I got one at gunpoint. Nissan dealership 29. Get out of the car! Get out of the car! Get out of the car! Get out!
I'll be in route 59 and I'm not sure if that's where he's at or not. I'll be code 3.
Where's ABL showing there?
Get out of the car! Get out of the car! Show me your hands! Hey! Get on the ground!
4266
I need an 18. Show me your hands! Get on the ground! Go to my patrol vehicle. Shots fired! Shots fired!
So as you guys seen there, everything in that clip happened very quickly. From the start of the interaction to when the shooting happened was only around 90 seconds. And even though everything happened so fast, there's a lot to unpack here. I decided not to show the actual shooting itself, even though the police had it blurred out. So hopefully that should appease the YouTube gods. The man who was fatally shot was 29-year-old Brandon Combs, and the officer involved was Concord police officer Timothy Larson. Officer Larson was on routine patrol and entered the parking lot of the Nissan dealership on Highway 29 in Concord. His attention was drawn to a Nissan Frontier in the parking lot with the interior light on. The driver's door was partway open with a person in dark clothes sitting in the driver's seat. Officer Larson initially thought that it was an employee from the dealership that was in the truck. What Officer Larson didn't know at the time was that Combs had been just released from jail approximately 36 hours earlier. He had a felony fugitive warrant pending from another state and several felony and misdemeanor convictions on his record. Since Officer Larson was focused on the Frontier truck, he did not see the glass door that Combs had smashed to break into the Nissan dealership, where he had just stolen several key fobs and personal articles from the desks and lockers of employees who worked there. Combs also stole a black Nissan jacket and put it on himself. Officer Larson parked his patrol vehicle under the awning near the front of the dealership. He left the police SUV running and got out and walked towards the Frontier truck where the man later identified as Brandon Combs was sitting. As Officer Larson was approaching the truck, Combs leaned his head out the open door and said, "Hey, take off your gun, take off your gun." And as you've seen in the clip, Officer Larson was a bit taken off guard by this. He then shined his flashlight through the windshield of the truck and Combs quickly closed the door and began moving his hands around out of view while looking down. Larson then unholstered his gun and moved to the driver's side window of the truck. The truck was not actually turned on at this time, and Officer Larson asked Combs what he was doing. Combs dropped his hand and began to move around in the truck while he was looking down. Larson told Combs not to move. Combs brought his hands back into view for a second and Larson saw blood on his left hand and a key fob in his right hand. Officer Larson continued to give Combs commands not to move, and Combs failed to obey the commands and continued to look down and move his hands around inside the truck. Officer Larson grabbed the door handle and began to order Combs out of the truck while he stepped back to create a distance between himself and Combs. Officer Larson continued to order Combs out of the truck, but Combs still failed to comply. Combs again grabbed the door and closed it and continued to move his hands around inside the truck. Officer Larson quickly called over his radio that he had one at gunpoint at the Nissan dealership and to send help. Larson reapproached the truck and reordered Combs to get out 3 more times. Again, Officer Larson tried to open the truck door again and Combs quickly closed it. Officer Larson backed up, holstered his weapon and pulled out his taser and reapproached the truck and pulled the handle, and Combs quickly locked the door and continued to move around inside the truck, and he refused to get out. Larson quickly backed up and realised that his taser would not be effective enough and holstered it. He then quickly pulled out his ASP baton, reapproached the truck and struck the window twice without breaking it and dropped the ASP baton. Officer Larson began backing up to take cover and redrew his firearm. He then continued to give Combs numerous commands. Combs continued to move around in the truck and Officer Larson could not see Combs' hands or what Combs was reaching for. Officer Larson, concerned that Combs may have a weapon, then took cover behind a white van in the parking lot and called in over the radio to tell his location and again to send help. Throughout the encounter with Combs, Officer Larson issued 15 verbal commands which Combs ignored. Suddenly, Larson saw Combs jump out of the truck on the passenger side and begin to run. Officer Larson said that he thought he was about to get into a foot chase with Combs, but within a few seconds, Combs rounded the front of Larson's police vehicle and jumped into the driver's seat. Officer Larson then called over the radio, "He's going to my patrol vehicle." Standing upright between the front driver's and passenger seat in the police SUV was an AR-15 assault rifle that could be released with the push of a button on the console and the flip of a latch on the stand holding it. Officer Larson said he saw Combs' left hand on the steering wheel, but he could not see his right hand. Larson saw Combs looking down towards the release button for the assault rifle. Officer Larson was then about 5 to 10 feet away from the front of his police SUV towards the passenger side front tyre when he heard the engine of the police SUV begin to start up. Fearing for his life in the fact that he thought he was about to be run over, Larson fired 5 rapid succession shots through the front windshield of the police SUV, and then he heard the engine roar louder as if the gas pedal has been pressed all the way down. Larson called in shots fired, and then quickly fired one more shot. Larson moved parallel with the passenger side door, pulled open the door and gave Combs multiple verbal commands. Combs' right hand could not be seen at that time and he moved around more slowly now inside the patrol vehicle. Officer Larson stood at the passenger side of the police SUV and continued to call in his location and ask for help. He continued to tell Combs not to move and to show him his hands and to shut off the car. Officer Larson had around 10 rounds left in his firearm and he did not fire any more rounds. It took about a minute and a half for backup to arrive, and while Larson waited, he called over the radio to send EMS. When the first officer arrived on the scene, Larson told him that Combs was in the driver's seat and to go around to the other side of the police vehicle. Larson told the officer, "I don't know what he's got." The first 2 officers on the scene went to the driver's side, continued to give commands to Combs to show his hands. They then opened the door, pulled him from the police SUV and laid him on the ground and offered aid until EMS arrived. Combs was transported to the hospital where medical personnel tried to offer aid for his injuries. Unfortunately, doctors were unable to save his life and he was later pronounced dead. Now guys, what I was reading from there was the District Attorney case review and findings for this particular case. In closing, the District Attorney said, "In making this decision, I reviewed the SBI investigative report that contained body-worn camera videos, dashcam video footage, surveillance videos inside and outside of the dealership, Officer Larson's statement, responding officer statements, first responder statements, crime scene photos and reports and other documents contained in the full investigative file. I have also reviewed the law regarding self-defense, defense of others and what can be considered a deadly weapon, the reasonably prudent officer standard and other relevant aspects of the law that may pertain to this case. In addition, I conferred with the use of force consultant and multiple police procedure professionals. After a thorough review of the facts of this case and the law that would apply to these facts, the evidence showed that Officer Larson did not utilise excessive force when he fired his weapon into the fully revved police SUV that was pointed at him a few feet away, that Brandon Combs was attempting to steal. Accordingly, the District Attorney Office will not charge Officer Larson with any criminal offences arising out of the incident on February the 13th, 2022 at the Nissan dealership in Concord. Attorneys for Combs' family released a statement saying the District Attorney didn't care about the facts and that her decision to not file charges was wrong. The district attorney thinks that kind of brutality, disregard for human life and contempt for the rule of law is just fine if you wear a badge, the statement said in part. Concord Chief of Police Gary Gassick offered condolences to the Combs family and said that he respects the DA's decision not to charge Larson. Chief Gassick fired Larson after an internal investigation of the shooting. Chief Gassick said in his statement, "This tragedy has caused enormous grief for the Combs family and we continue to extend our deepest condolences to them." Immediately after the officer-involved shooting, I requested an independent investigation by the North Carolina State Bureau of Investigation to ensure confidence in the investigation throughout the community. Asking for an outside review is not required by law, but it's the right thing to do. I respect the independent investigation and the separate independent decision today by the District Attorney to not bring charges against former officer Timothy Larson. Outside of the independent investigation, the police department conducted our own personnel review of former officer Larson. That review concluded that he repeatedly made false statements and he refused to cooperate with our review. Because I hold our officers to the highest standards, I fired him for that. Police officers have a difficult job and ensuring they have the trust of the community is one of the most important ones. We'll continue to work each day to serve and protect our community in every way possible. And as I mentioned there, the family aren't very happy with the way the investigation went and the DA's decision either. The family have also filed a wrongful death lawsuit against Larson and the City of Concord. The lawsuit claims Larson did not render first aid to Combs after the shooting. The lawsuit also accuses Larson of using excessive force and the city of wrongful death. And as of September 2022, the family are asking for a federal investigation into the matter and are asking the Department of Justice to investigate. But they're not the only ones filing lawsuits. Former Officer Larson is also filing his own lawsuit.
Concord police officer suing the city and the police chief for his firing. Timothy Larson was fired last year after shooting and killing Brandon Combs. This is video from the incident last February. The Cabarrus County District Attorney found Larson did not use excessive force in the deadly shooting and never charged him. However, the Concord Police Department and SBI looked into the shooting and questioned Larson about his actions. According to a notice of dismissal used to terminate Larson, the department said Larson gave investigators false information about the shooting.
So by the sounds of things, I don't think this is the last that we'll hear of this case, folks. So now that we've seen that, I'm going to give you my take and analysis on the whole situation. First off, what I want to say is, regardless of the circumstances and what happened and who the man was, a man still lost his life here, which is terribly sad and tragic. And my sympathies and condolences go out to his family and friends. But I can't overlook the fact that this man had some culpability in what led to his death. First off, being out in the middle of the night, burglarising a car dealership is a very bad choice to be making. And he chose to go to that location at that time and break the law. Having only been released 36 hours earlier from jail, I'm sorry, but that's just looking for trouble. And not to mention the fact that you have warrants for your arrest as well. Officer Larson was just at work on patrol when he seen some suspicious activity that he decided to investigate. But there are definitely a few things that I think he could have done differently here that maybe would have led to a different outcome. When Larson started approaching the truck and asking him what was going on, he should have kind of realised that the jig was up and just cooperated with the officer. But instead he decided to throw off some of the major red flags to get officers' backs up, such as ignoring commands and then moving your hand around inside the vehicle where they can't see it. So straight away, tensions were starting to rise. One of the major things that Officer Larson could have done that would have led to a different outcome here would have been to just not leave his patrol car unlocked with the keys in it. And also for the fact that there's an AR-15 assault rifle sitting between the front two seats. Now I know that hindsight's a great thing and it's easy for us to look back after the fact, but I do have a good feeling that if he hadn't have had access to that vehicle that he may not have been shot at all. He may have ran off down the street on foot and may have been apprehended by other officers in the area. I just think from the start, the actions of Combs led to the officer getting his back up, the adrenaline start pumping, and I think the officer got slightly panicked. Everything did seem like it was done in a bit of a flurry, with the gun coming out, then going up and pulling the taser, trying to pull the door, then the bat coming out, trying to break the window and stuff like that. I do think Officer Larson was genuinely fearful, as this guy was doing all sorts of things that would raise suspicions, but even considering that fact, I do think Officer Larson should have kept his cool a bit better. During the whole panic that was going on when he was trying to open the door and stuff like that, I think there was a lot of opportunities there for him to end up getting shot had the fella in the truck had a weapon on him. Personally, if I was Officer Larson and I had asked him to step out of the truck and then that whole thing happened when I opened the door, he shut it again, I would have just backed off a little bit, took some cover and waited for backup to arrive. I think with Officer Larson continually approaching the car, trying to open the door and then trying to smash the window spooked the other guy, and that's why he thought he had to get out of there. I just think if Officer Larson had kept the situation a bit calmer and just backed off a little bit, he might have been able to keep the guy in that truck till some backup arrived. Another thing I want to say on Officer Larson is that I totally agree with the chief's decision to fire him. If he was being misleading during the investigation and there was other anomalies like that, well then he has no place being on the police force if he can't be honest. And in my personal opinion, I think that whole interaction was very panicked, and if he gets panicky like that, well then maybe it's best that he's not on the police force. I don't know how things are going to go with his lawsuit, and I'm not quite sure exactly why he's suing the city. I don't know if it's for like a wrongful dismissal or something like that, but I guess we'll just have to wait and see. On the subject of Mr. Combs, well, as I said earlier, I think he just should have made better decisions on that night and just stayed at home and went to bed instead of going out to try rob cars. I think he should have just manned up to the fact of what he was doing and just complied with the officer from the start. When it comes to the family and their comments and their lawsuit, I understand where the family's anger is coming from. They've just lost their son and they're obviously very upset. But at the same time, they do have to realise that he was out there breaking the law. The officer approached him, he didn't comply, and one thing led to another. The situation got a bit out of control, and that's what resulted. I'm not saying the officer was right for shooting him. Nobody deserves to lose their life over attempting to rob a car or burgle in a car dealership. It's never right when someone is killed, and it's very hard for us to put ourselves into both of those people's shoes on that night to really know what was going through their minds when all of that went down. But at the end of the day, I think all involved here could have done something a little different that could have led to a much better outcome for everybody. Well guys, I hope you enjoyed that video. Don't forget to let me know what you think down below in the comments. Please drop us a like on this video as it really does help the channel out. And if you'd like to help support the channel and what we do here, don't forget to check out the links down below in the description. A massive shout out to everybody that's watching this on the premiere. Thank you very much for joining me. And as always, a huge shout out to my channel members. Thank you very much for your continued support and encouragement guys. Don't forget to check out some of our other videos that should be appearing on screen now, and as always, I'll be back in a couple of days with another video. I hope to see you then. Until then guys, stay safe, take care, peace.